On today's episode of MULTIPULM Voices, we're continuing our Women in Science series with a conversation about what it takes to move from research to real-world implementation. Welcome to MULTIPULM Voices. I am your host, Chris Aguilar, and this is where research meets real-world care. MULTIPULM is a Horizon Europe project working on accessible integrated care for people with multiple chronic conditions in low and middle income countries, specifically Brazil, Serbia, and Türkiye. Throughout the month of February, in recognition of the International Day of Women and Girls in Science, we're launching our Women in Science podcast series, where we spotlight women shaping integrated ethical and implementable science. This series is about visibility, ownership, and leadership, because the future of integrated care is being built by both men and women's voices deserve to be heard. I'm really pleased to welcome Professor Shereen Nabhani Gebara, Principal Investigator from Kingston University. In MULTIPULM, her team sits right at the point where science meets practice, helping ensure the project is not only innovative, but usable, ethical, and sustainable in the real world. Welcome, Shereen.
Thank you. It's really lovely to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you with us, Shereen. To get us started, could you tell our listeners a bit about yourself and your role within MULTIPULM?
So I'm a professor in pharmacy at Kingston University, and I'm the principal investigator for the Kingston University team. And our role within the project really is quite strategic because we are within work package 2, where we're looking at the initial design, thinking about the needs, planning holistically how it's going to work. And then also towards the end, when we're implementing the studies, overseeing that process and also evaluating it. So that's one of my favorite things to do in a project, is to be involved within the full cycle.
Before we go into more detail with the different parts that you play with MULTIPULM and your involvement, we'd like to know a little bit about what pulled you into working on chronic respiratory, multimorbidity, and integrated care.
So I think for me, the biggest pull is integrated care, because that touches all aspects of healthcare. If we are not offering a seamless journey for patients, then we've got that fragmentation that can put patients at risk of duplication, over-medication, confusion, and really worse outcomes. So for me, the most important part of this project is the integrated part, and being able to use innovation and technology to support the integration of care, to provide that seamless, holistic approach to care. And that is extremely important for people with chronic respiratory conditions, because they also experience other comorbidities that complicate the picture. And therefore, there might be multiple healthcare professionals involved in their care. And if these healthcare professionals are not connected, if they're not communicating with each other, then the patient's outcome will suffer as a whole.
At the end of the day, you're trying to help real people with real situations in the medical realm to live a better life. Thinking about your career and your studies, your work, has there ever been a moment where being a woman has shaped your scientific journey in a positive or a negative way?
As a parent, the juggle is real. Having children, young children, and being responsible for juggling all of their needs, along with juggling my needs, which are my career needs, is not easy, is very difficult. And this is where a lot of women, either by choice or by necessity, decide to take a career pause. And that's fine, but that can have an impact on somebody who's very ambitious, who really want to be there, and they've got that fear of missing out. They've got FOMO because they're missing out on all of the career aspirations that they would have dreamt for themselves. I would say, not as a woman, as a parent, definitely. I felt it. I felt the juggle. It just became harder. Everything became harder when I could stay at work for the longest hours and not worry, not look at the time. Suddenly I had a curfew. So suddenly I had to be home at a specific time to pick up my children, make sure that they get dinner, go to bed. Similarly, when you're part of EU project, one of the best parts is the travel. So you get to travel every 6 months to all these various European countries. You meet your colleagues and you brainstorm and you plan and you overplan. And again, when you've got small children, you can't always do that. And you end up missing out. So that's from a negative perspective, if you want. It's not really negative because I made it work. It just made it a little bit more complicated. In terms of a positive perspective, usually I don't like to stereotype, but they say that women are really good at multitasking. And I am the queen of multitasking. So if you take a cross section of my brain, you don't want to see what's inside. There's so many projects juggling at the same time, students, research, PhD, grant funding, mentorship, all happening at the same time. And if it's truly a women's thing to multitask, then that's definitely one of the biggest perks, I think, is being able to multitask.
I love how you put it. That's not the struggle is real, the juggle is real. If, as you said, women are known to be wonderful multitaskers, I am witness to this with all my colleagues that I work with who are women. I admire their ability to do many things at the same time, something that I definitely find difficult as a man to do. So it's nice that while the juggle is real, women have this ability to juggle and to do it well. This is a perfect segue to my next question, which is, apart from being a wonderful multitaskers, how would you say women approach problem solving? And more specifically in the field that you work with, in health research, especially with our context of our project, with low to middle income countries, with multimorbidity, with these different factors?
So for me, I can speak as myself, as a person. So I don't always like to stereotype and say, oh, I do this because I'm a woman. I do this because I'm Shereen. I tend to approach things with a lot of empathy and also a lot of calm. So I listen a lot first. I tend to be quiet in meetings and I listen, and then I take my time to approach something with a lot of empathy and understanding. So that is usually my approach, even though sometimes I do get emotional about specific topics that are very dear to my heart, especially if there's a bit of injustice or a patient has not been properly cared for, then I suddenly get very upset. But usually I listen and I take time to plan my next move. So that's usually my approach.
We are human after all, right? But your guiding light of being empathic and listening sounds like a very good approach, especially in today's world. And you talked a little bit about before about this. As you said, it's not so negative, but maybe an aspect of being a woman and being a professional, but also being a mother at the same time. So this could be maybe some might consider it a bit of a barrier or a kind of an obstacle that a lot of women have to overcome. Are there any other barriers that you can think of in science that we don't talk enough about, that is not really a main topic for a lot of people?
It's related. So something that I've always reflected upon is that when you think about the traditional roles that women assume, right? It's usually the main caregiver of the children. That is shifting. That is definitely changing. But so, for example, when I speak to my students, so I'm a professor in the university, I always ask my students, why did you choose pharmacy, for example? And sometimes some of the answers that I get, it just makes me think. So a lot of them might say, oh, it's a very good profession to have if I want to raise a family because it allows me to be flexible. And when an 18-year-old is planning their career based on whether something is flexible for family, I can't help but think that there has been a lot of social influence on that person because they are deciding their career based on the assumption or the plan of a family, and that the main family responsibilities will fall upon their shoulders. Now, again, this is shifting. So this is not necessarily the same within all couples or families. but within specific cultural, traditional societies, that is still the same. And there's a pressure and a burden on the girl to think about that their main duty is to have a family and to raise their children. So that really affects their plans and the way they see things. And it just makes me reflect. It just makes me think.
Wow, such a big societal impact at such a young age already. Speaking of your classroom, when you are looking out at your students, do you see a kind of gender equality among the students? Is this something that has changed through time that you've noticed? Do you see an equal amount of male and female students in your classroom, or is it more skewed?
So within pharmacy, it tends to be quite balanced and even skewing towards more women in the pharmacy profession. And again, because it's seen as a profession that can help somebody who wants to focus on their family. However, what I've noticed is that more and more, that is no longer the plan. So yes, there's still a subset of quite traditional way of looking at things, but more and more I now see the aspirations of wanting to go beyond the first degree, wanting to do a PhD, wanting to really dream big and achieve a lot. So I do see this shifting, definitely, but we still have a subset that do have the traditional mindset and have succumbed to societal pressure, which is real, which is very real. And it helps shape the decisions that they make at such an early age. Instead of dreaming big and dreaming about flapping their wings and going anywhere they want, they're molded into believing that no, they have to think at this level, plan for a family, make sure that they're taking on all the responsibilities of the family. Sometimes it's not just the family that you choose, the family that you have. So within some of my students, and I have a lot of admiration for that. So they're full-time pharmacy students, but because they're the only female in the house, so let's suppose she's got 4 brothers and a dad, maybe the mom is not in the picture, it's all the domestic responsibilities fall upon her shoulders. They are not shared equally. And therefore, somebody who needs to be a student and be carefree is not able to do that because at home, she's got the cooking, the cleaning, and all the traditional things that are expected out of her because she is the only woman in the house. So sometimes it's a big burden. Yeah.
So hopefully this podcast like this one where people get to hear, young girls get to hear your story, your experience can be a motivation and inspiration that there are many things that these young girls can achieve without being conditioned or trying to reach the status quo. Thank you for sharing that, Shereen. Before we talked a bit about integrated care and your focus on integrated care within the MULTIPULM project, how would you say your work helps to ensure that the innovation in science and in the medical field doesn't only stay in the lab, but that it actually reaches real patients, real families?
So I think that's, for me, that's very important. And that's how my research is. It's very close to practice. So what I've always adopted is this cycle where the problems that I want to approach through my research are coming from observed practice challenges. So these are the ones that we study, we observe, we design an intervention to address them, and then we test them back in practice. So the loop is very short because it's observed, it's addressed, and then it's implemented. And that way, it brings me a lot of satisfaction just to think that it was because of this piece of work that shaped this practice. It has touched people's lives and have made their journey through the healthcare system a little bit less difficult because of the work that I've contributed to. So that sense of satisfaction and achievement keeps me going, makes me not mind the juggling.
So in a way, you're not working in a vacuum, but really seeing how this affects them and already making improvements in their lives. So that's really nice to hear.
for me, it's very valuable because it really shapes the direction of the work that we're doing. Because oftentimes, as a researcher, as a pharmacist, I may not see all the various angles that a person who is in the moment experiences. So somebody going through the healthcare service for their respiratory condition, their multimorbidity, their rich experience, their lived experience is very valuable because it can help shape the research questions that I address, but also how I implement and how I evaluate and what I need to pay attention to.
There are, in fact, a lot of angles, right? And everybody is their own world. Keeping that in mind, what kind of risks do you think we face in the scientific community when health innovation ignores social, cultural, and gender dimensions?
It's a big risk because historically, that's what we used to do. We used to adopt this one size fits all, right? So I conceive it in the lab or I conceive it on my computer, I dream it up, and then I design it and I implement it. But my experiences will then shape the type of service that I've designed, and it will be very one-dimensional. Whereas if I involve a diverse group of people who have a shared experience, they could be diverse in terms of their race, in terms of their culture, in terms of their sexuality or their gender identity. It could be if they're neurodiverse or not, or neurotypical, or if they're living with a physical disability. So think about all of these protected characteristics. If you don't factor them in, if you don't hear the voices of the people with that lived experience, then you are going to design something that's not fit for purpose. It'll be fit for purpose for people who look like me, but anybody else, because I haven't dreamt about or I can't fathom their experience, my innovation will be flawed.
Very important perspective you're giving us there, Shereen. Thank you for sharing. Thinking back and looking back at your life and your career as well, has there been a person or a moment that has shaped your career, that has really either set you in your path or encouraged you, really inspired you during your studies or during your career?
Yeah. So during my first postdoctoral training, I was in America, and I worked with this phenomenal woman who was juggling. So she was older than me. She was later on in her career. So she was juggling everything. So she had a full-time job in the hospital. She was a mother of two. She had a part-time job in the university. But at the same time, what she also did was a lot of outreach, working with the community, volunteering her time at clinics to work with underserved populations. And she would bring me along with her. So she was my mentor and my supervisor at the time. And that stayed with me. And then, so I can see that as a pivotal moment where I thought, yeah, that's something I want to do as well. So then when I finished my postdoctoral training and I then became to practice myself, that is something that I did. So now I do a lot of outreach. So when I lived in Lebanon, I designed a clinic working in refugee camps. So I used to take my students along and we go and spend Saturdays there meeting all sorts of patients, providing them the care that they can't afford. And that gave me a lot of, it just made me feel that I'm doing something. I'm giving back, if you want. Yes, so that moment when her name was Colleen, when Colleen invited me to join all of these outreach clinics that she was part of, that was something that kind of like a light bulb moment. I thought, that is something that I want to make sure is part of my life moving forward, is giving back and making sure that you are making an impact in your community.
Wow, I have no doubt that all of these experiences have surely sparked more light bulb moments among your students. Tell us a little bit more about your work in Lebanon and this clinic. Is there any moment that you really look back on and say, wow, this was a big thing, or any kind of thing that you take away from?
So we were all volunteering our Saturdays to work at this free clinic. So that was a very rewarding experience. So it was called the VOC, the Volunteer Outreach Clinic. And when I first joined, it was a little bit chaotic. But with my experiences I brought to it, we were able to organize it. We created appointments with the pharmacists, appointments with the doctors, the nutritionists, whoever they needed to see. And we created this community of patients who felt supported, who felt heard, who felt respected. And I do remember the story that stayed with me is because the nature of where we were working. So the clinic was in a refugee camp in Lebanon. And so it was a very volatile area. And I remember that summer, a war broke out in Lebanon. It was very unsafe. And we had to close the clinic for 2 months. And I remember one specific patient that I was taking care of, and he had a history of stroke, and he had a history of also lung disease. And I was taking care of him and all the medicines that he was taking. But because there was a gap of 2 months and he couldn't have access to medicine, didn't have access to advice, when I saw him, when we reopened back in September, and I saw him, he had suffered another stroke and he lost the ability to speak. And it was a very emotional moment for me because I felt guilty, but I also felt that this person has been failed by the system, failed by the world, because if war hadn't broken out, then we would have been there for him. He would have received his medicine and he would not have lost his speech. So it was a very emotional moment for me, but it wasn't a deterrent for me to keep working in clinics, but it was one of those things that was, so I'm talking over 20 years ago, still stays with me till now.
Sounds like you're very in touch with the human side of science and of this field and this work. And that sounds to me like it's something that probably drives you, as like you mentioned earlier as well, that this people factor, this human factor is really what makes everything worthwhile, right? Now we're going to go to my favorite part of the interview, which is where I get to ask a little bit about maybe Shereen when she was much younger. So if you could jump in a time machine and travel back in time and come face to face with 6-year-old Shereen, who may have thoughts, I don't know, maybe had thoughts about going into science or into the medical field, what would you tell her now?
So growing up, so I grew up in Lebanon. So I grew up in a lower income country, right? That is ravaged by war and conflict and you name it, we've had it. So growing up there, I would always dream big. I always wanted to do more. I always wanted to go beyond the expected. I wanted to shatter expectations and all of that. And I did receive pushback because Lebanon is a traditional country with a traditional social system. And so the expectation was a burden. But I did have supportive parents who would let me dream big, but then would say, dream big, but not that big. It was always that fine. Dream big, but not that big. So if I can go back and speak to a younger version and see it, say, yeah, always dream big. Don't ever stop dreaming big. Don't let anything, because it's when you dream big, you may not hit that target, but if you hit close enough, you're in an amazing place. Yeah, so that's what I would say is continue to dream big and don't be afraid. And you will achieve. If you dream big, you will achieve. So that's my message.
Important words for the young girls who might be listening to this podcast to hear and to really take to heart. What a strong way to end our interview today. But before we wrap up, I would love to ask you if there's anything else you want to impart or share with our audience who might be listening on Spotify or watching on YouTube. Is there anything you think people should hear more often or any message you want to share with us?
I think it's that same message. Don't be afraid to dream big. Don't aim low. Aim high. And if you miss, you've still achieved a lot. So there's always going to be challenges and there's always going to be complications, but you can always find a way, or you can find somebody to work with to help you get there. So sometimes you don't have to do it alone. If you collaborate and engage, then you help each other to get there. So
Shereen, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your story and your work. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. It was lovely to have some of these stories that I've shared with you, I haven't talked about in a very long time. So thank you for bringing them out.
To everyone listening, thank you for being part of this series. If you want to support women shaping integrated care, like Shereen, follow the Multipulm podcast, share this episode with your network, and explore Multipulm's work through our website, www.multipulm.eu, and social media channels as well on LinkedIn and X. See you in the next episode.
Multipulm is funded by the European Union. Views and opinions expressed are, however, those of the author only and do not necessarily reflect those of the European Union or the European Health and Digital Executive Agency. Neither the European Union nor the granting authority can be held responsible for them.